It was the summer of 2023. The garden was looking amazing despite the heat, though in the case of some plants, perhaps because of the heat. Tomatoes in particular were doing well. Even with the intense summer, they were managing to produce and thrive. Of course, as any gardener knows, growing tomatoes does come with some challenges. I'd been looking consistently, checking the leaves almost every day for a small sphere. I realize that most are looking for these eggs in the hopes of stopping the life cycle before it even has a chance to start. In my case, I wanted to witness the life cycle right from the start. Over the years, I've come to appreciate the purpose hornworms have in the garden. While that doesn't mean allowing tomatoes, peppers, and other nightshade plants to be completely consumed, it does mean allowing the hornworms to exist and seeing if nature will deal with them. Today, I want to take you back to that amazing summer when I was finally able to witness a hornworm go from a tiny egg in my garden to a moth flying through the night. It's the damage that attracts our attention before anything else. Walking past a tomato plant and noticing the leaves are looking thinner than yesterday. Picking a tomato and seeing a section of leaves that are missing. Hornworms are incredibly good at turning a healthy looking plant into something that looks like it's been through a small storm. The funny thing is, when you're standing there looking at the damage, you might not see them at all. That's because they are masters of camouflage. Their green bodies blend in almost perfectly with tomato leaves and stems. They curve in a way to mimic a branch, and looking at the underside of a leaf, you notice how their pattern matches the leaf veins. On their own, they honestly look a bit like a tomato leaf that is simply curled up. That summer, I was looking carefully, under leaves, along the stems, especially around the new growth. And instead of finding an adult, I found something even better, an egg. It is sometimes hard to remember that the giant caterpillar we eventually find does start out as an egg. During the night, a female sphinx moth will lay a single egg on various leaves, sometimes on the top, other times on the bottom. And she doesn't just focus on tomato plants. She'll lay them on eggplants, pepper plants, tobacco, even goji berry. Discovering this tiny greenish yellow sphere, I was beyond delighted to realize I had a chance. Still, I was going to allow nature to happen. If this egg was going to hatch, it would have to be outside on the plant. Because of the heat, it took less than a week for a tiny caterpillar to emerge. As in the case with all caterpillars at this stage, the very first thought is food. When a hornworm first hatches, it's almost hard to believe it's going to become the giant caterpillar you might find later in the season. It is tiny, but it doesn't stay tiny for long. What is almost more shocking is how quickly it grows. Seeing it put on size over the course of several days, one quickly realizes how it seems that they show up overnight. Its voracious appetite never seems to slow down. During the heat of the day, it does rest, trying to hide among the underside of the leaves, which is another reason that our plants look worse the next day, as they are often feeding through the night. As the hornworm grew, I even managed to witness it shedding one of its outer layers, which it will do several times. Molting, kind of think of it as outgrowing a set of clothes and needing a change of new ones. And it was a remarkable process. Through this stage, I was not prepared for how loud the chewing can be. At times, it sounded as though someone was eating a bag of chips. But barely a few weeks passed, and the caterpillar that was once invisible on a leaf had now become so large it could be seen easily. But it still seemed to be a bottomless pit regarding hunger, and I was wondering how much longer before it was ready for the next phase. Eventually, something finally changed. The hornworm stops eating, and it's gotten large enough. This is one of my favorite parts of the life cycle because it's the moment when the hornworm stops becoming a tomato eater and starts becoming something else. Plus, it is the part that most of us don't think about, and certainly not something I had witnessed in person. What might be surprising for a lot of us is seeing it leave the plant. Even more shocking, the caterpillar might travel a great distance away from the plant, looking for the perfect spot. Normally, a hornworm will burrow into the soil to enter into the pupal stage. In this case, though, I had the hornworm, which I decided to call Darwin, housed in a protective spot outside. This was not only to keep an eye on it, but to protect it from the birds and other predators that would happily feast on it. Once the hornworm started wandering away from the tomato plant, searching for a spot, I knew the time had come. I placed a container of soil into the space and let it wander around until it did finally burrow itself into the soil to start the next chapter. Down in the soil, the mature hornworm enters the pupal stage. This is where the really dramatic transformation takes place. The body is breaking down inside a chrysalis, forming wings, shifting its entire body to eventually become a moth. It was this phase I was most looking forward to. Waiting a little over a week after Darwin had burrowed itself, I dug around into the soil to find the chrysalis. They are alive. The encasing is still flexible, allowing them to move around enough to ward off potential predators, at least a little bit. Seeing the reddish-brown encasing among the soil, it was still hard to fathom that this caterpillar that I had watched burrow itself into the soil just a week before was now inside this enclosure, and what would emerge would look nothing like what had entered. Of course, timing is never perfect. As much as I wanted to film exactly when Darwin emerged, nature decided otherwise. I knew it was going to happen soon, but that evening, in the short amount of time I was in another room, that is when the emerging happened. Still, I was glad to see Darwin was healthy and made it out without issue. Once again, the startling realization that a green caterpillar that had been munching on a tomato plant less than 3 weeks prior was now a hawk moth, ready to fly into the night. In this case, Darwin had other plans. I tried putting it outside right away, but the moth wanted to stay in the container that night, so I left it with the plan to release it first thing in the morning. Morning came, and I carefully was able to get Darwin onto my hand. Holding this moth was an incredible moment. The weight was noticeable. Feeling the delicate legs as they gripped my hand almost tickled. Thankfully, there were plenty of flowers blooming, and carefully I transferred Darwin to a zinnia nearby, and it hung out for a while, just kind of getting used to being outside and now being the moth. This whole cycle, of course, does bring up the question that I think every gardener ends up asking. What do I do when I find a hornworm? For me, that answer has shifted over the years. As fascinating as the life cycle is, of course, I still want tomatoes. So how do I balance both? In my case, I grow tomatoes specifically for them. But maybe your situation is different. All of this is part of gardening. We're constantly balancing our plants with the creatures that share the garden with us. And that is one of the things I enjoy the most about growing food and plants and creating this space. It's not just a collection of plants, it is an ecosystem. When I think about the hornworm now, I don't just see the damage. I think about the amazing summer of seeing the entire journey, from a tiny egg placed on a leaf to a nearly invisible caterpillar hatching into the world. The weeks of feeding and growing, the molting, eventually becoming a giant green caterpillar hiding among my tomato plant, and then one day disappearing into the soil, to eventually emerge into a moth that's ready to start the cycle all over again. The whole process can happen right under my feet without me seeing most of it. And that is one of the things I love about gardening. Every time I think I understand what's happening out there, I discover another little story unfolding beneath the leaves. I may not always be happy to find a hornworm in my garden, but admittedly, I'm always fascinated when I do. I hope you enjoyed this journey with me, and I would love to hear your stories about hornworms in your garden. Please share them below in the comments, and I will catch you next time.